Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Weeks. I am a full-time MBA and EMBA admissions consultant, which means that I help applicants get admitted into top business schools. And talking of top business schools, today I am with Melissa Rapp, the Associate Dean of Graduate Admissions at Emory University's Goizueta Business School. And I'm with Aakash Patel, a current student at Goizueta and a former client of mine. Melissa and Aakash have kindly agreed to join me to field a few questions about Goizueta's MBA program, including some of the slightly more controversial topics that are being debated in the business school world right now. Aakash, Melissa, thank you very much for joining.
Hi, Sam. It's great to see you.
Good to see you again.
Aakash, it's been a while. Lovely to see your face again.
I know. 1 year has flown by.
Absolutely, hasn't it? So I was hoping that we could dive in straight away in terms of talking about careers. Careers for most MBA applicants is the single most important aspect of taking an MBA. It is the reason why they go and do an MBA. Sure, some people like to take a bit of time off work and pivot and whatever, but really careers is one of the most important parts of an MBA application process. And Goizueta is ranked, according to the FT, in the top 10 for career placement, which is a really, really awesome record. And so I think the first question for me is, Melissa, what do you think the school is doing differently to other business schools when it comes to career placement?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're really proud of the success that we have with our career services here at Goizueta. And I think it comes back to some of the values that the school has across all of our programs. And one of the things that we're really committed to is an intimate learning environment. So Goizueta has one of the smallest cohorts of any of the top schools. That gives us the opportunity to provide more one-on-one coaching, more individualized career planning. We don't feel any need to push someone into a more traditional path that they're not comfortable with. Our career coaches spend a lot of time understanding each individual's goals and aspirations and working with them to craft a plan that's going to allow them to achieve those goals. So I think it's a combination of Goizueta attracts these really high performing, great individuals, and we're looking for that fit in an intimate learning environment with our candidates. We layer on then this personalized career coaching and instruction, and then add in the fact that 75% of top 100 companies have a presence here in Atlanta. It's given us the opportunity to build these great, deep, rich relationships with corporations around the world that give access to our students. So there's a lot of different things that kind of feed into this success. But, we're not happy until our students, that is the ultimate marker of success, is that career, and not just your next career, but several careers down the line or several jobs down the line. So we're really proud of that and really think that the commitment we have to individualization here is what promotes that.
That's absolutely brilliant. And it's obviously working. And Aakash, could I bring you into this conversation? You have been at Deloitte. You are a GSAPer. Can you explain to the viewers what that means and how an MBA fits into your journey generally, but also how the career services and how the program at Emory is helping you with your career and presumably your move back to Deloitte?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I spent 4 years at Deloitte as a campus hire straight out of undergrad. And a GSAP stands for Graduate School Assistant Program. It's Deloitte's lingo for saying you're sponsored to go to business school. So Deloitte sponsors, give or take, about 150 people every year to go to business school, either a 1 year or 2 year program. I'm in a 1 year program here at Emory. And so for me, I'm looking to go back to Deloitte. I commit 2 years, but the really nice part about the deal is I don't have to go back to what I was doing. So prior to business school, I was doing tech implementation. And when I go back to business school, I get to hit the reset button. And to answer your question, Sam, around, even though I'm not formally recruiting through career services, all the resources here have been really helpful for helping me identify what is the type of work that I want to do here, talking through faculty, talking to alumni, career services. And it's been really a roller coaster of a journey what I thought I wanted to do before coming to business school in my post-MBA life. I still want to go back to Deloitte and consulting, but what I want to do probably after school is changing, and it probably will change between now and when I go back 6 months from now, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's the real success is when we ask in the application process what people think they want to do after the MBA journey. And I often say if I stood in front of the graduation stage and cross-checked what they say they want to do in their application with what they're actually going to go do, no one could cross the stage. But to me, that's a real sign of the transformation that happens with students. Prior to business school, you can't know what you don't know. And part of our job is to expose you to different aspects of business, different aspects of yourself to really help you discover what it is that is really going to make you successful and happy after business school.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spend so much time with applicants figuring out what the story is going to be pre-MBA and what are you going to say to get into an MBA program, and a lot of those stories end up changing. And as you say, nothing wrong with that at all. So, Aakash, question for you then. So, you through the GSAP program and through your network, you are obviously connected with a lot of other people who are doing MBAs. Can you touch on how you think your experience at Goizueta compares to them at other schools?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to take a little nudge at Melissa and admissions here, but we need a bit more school swag. I've been looking for the GBS Patagonias that people are wearing. But jokes aside, I think one of the common things I hear from people about geography is really important as well as curriculum. And so a lot of people find themselves having to pick between maybe a college town, maybe being kind of farther away from a city, or being in a city where there's a trade-off where a lot of people already live there, they're established, and so it doesn't feel as tight-knit of a community. And so I think being here at Goizueta, it's really unique from different schools, and looking at my colleagues in that, it's the best of both. Because Goizueta is such a small program, it already is a tight community. And you live in a city. I live in Midtown, 20 minutes away. And a lot of people that I hang out with also live in Midtown, Virginia Highlands, in Buckhead. And so even though traffic can be pretty bad in Atlanta, I think that's the biggest differentiator is life outside the classroom. And I think if Goizueta was double or triple the size, I don't know if it would work. So I think it works out really well.
Interesting. I wonder if part of that location choice is you moved with your partner, didn't you, to do the program. Can you touch a little bit on how that experience has been moving with your partner? Has it been as smooth as you perhaps hoped?
Yeah, I think it couldn't have gone any better. And so uh, a little bit of a story behind that. I got into Goizueta round one. And then I told her she was applying to nursing programs around the country. And I told her you should apply to Emory. I think it makes sense. And then she got into Emory. Even though there's no formal relationship between the business and the nursing school, I was able to connect with someone from admissions at Goizueta, and they were able to reach out to someone at nursing and indicate that, hey, someone from the business school is applying with a partner. And they actually notified her a month before the round deadline. And then I had a proposal already lined up before she even applied to the school. So I proposed to her in March, where we both knew we were coming to Emory. And then we made the transition here both together in April. We both started in May. Timing wise, worked out beautifully. And because we're both on the same campus most days during the summer, while I was here in the 1 year program doing the core, we were able to carpool every day to and from campus for the most part. And even on days where we're both extremely busy, we get to catch up with each other. I'll joke around that she's kind of maybe the sweetheart of our 1 year program because she's always around and most people recognize her face almost as if she's one of us. So it's been probably one of my favorite aspects of coming here.
Absolutely brilliant. Congratulations on your engagement.
Yeah,
Thank you.
congratulations. That's so exciting.
So nice. Right. So let's talk a little bit about the actual application process to getting in. A lot of people watching this are thinking, I'd love to go to Goizueta. what do I need to do? And one of the big steps in the application process is obviously the GMAT. So my first question on the GMAT is there are studies out there that suggest that it favors students from high income households. It is a standardized test. Do you think standardized tests are still the way to compare applicants?
So I'll make a couple points here. I don't think standardized tests I think they're a meaningful way of understanding someone's academic abilities in some cases. We're aware of some of the restrictions or some of the ways that standardized testing doesn't always represent someone to the best of their abilities. And I think it's absolutely not the only way that we've ever judged any candidate. We really want candidates to have many platforms within the application to showcase their academic abilities. This is an academic program, and we do need to have assurances that a candidate can handle the rigor of the classroom. They can demonstrate that through those test scores, through their transcripts from other academic programs or undergraduate experiences, and through their work experience. So there's lots of ways to show that you have the academic abilities to perform in an MBA classroom. That's only one part of the experience. There's also, what have you done in your career so far? Does your story make sense in terms of, I'm here and I want to get to there? We've already talked about that might change, but does it make sense? Is an MBA an appropriate degree? Do you understand kind of some of the commitments that come with being an MBA student? Because it's a classroom experience, but it's also a co-curricular experience. And I'm sure you've had a lot of interactions with your classmates outside of class. Again, this intimate environment means we can't have anyone who just wants to fade into the background. All of our students at Goizueta really need to show up and be prepared to have an impact on the community. And so we are looking for that academic ability, but we're also looking for people who want to be a part of the community, who want to engage in meaningful ways with their classmates. So we're looking at a lot of different aspects of a student's portfolio as they present it in the application.
Okay. And there's a perception, certainly on the forums and on the wider web, that some groups of candidates typically have higher GMAT scores. For example, Indians, which is a relatively competitive pool, tend to have, or at least are perceived to have, higher GMAT points than the class average. Is that the case in your experience and at Goizueta? And if so, could you touch on maybe why?
So that is a true statement that there are segments that do perform better and do perform worse. And there's lots of studies that you can get into why that is, whether it's the academic preparation that the students receive and even starting in primary grades. Is it a socioeconomic factor that keeps some people from performing as well? Standardized tests definitely have their detractors. We do find that the Indian average GMAT is slightly higher than our typical. That was true also at other institutions I've worked at. So I don't think it's uncommon. I also don't think it's an indicator of anything significant in terms of how we put the class together. When we're building a class, again, the GMAT score is just one of the factors that we're looking at. And it is an indicator that we don't anticipate any trouble with quantitative classes, which is usually our biggest concern.
Gotcha.
Sam, do you mind if I jump in?
Absolutely.
So I think there's maybe something that couldn't come from admissions, but my perspective is there may be added pressure from the rankings perspective. And I think it has a downstream impact on you want to maintain your status. You may want to move up because that's how you attract employers as a school. And so I think fundamentally, maybe something needs to change with how much weight is put on standardized testing from the rankings, because maybe ultimately a school has to make a choice on, we may need to bring a pool of people with a certain level of scores. And it's a tough choice to make. But the school is also doing it for the greater part of the class, making sure that they're bringing in the same quality of people coming to recruit.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really, really insightful. And okay, so we've talked about the GMAT. a little bit, another part of the admissions process that I'd like to touch on is admissions consultants and their perception. So I think, Melissa, could I start with you, please? Could you touch on, so some commentators perceive admissions consultants as an unfair advantage. Others consider it leveling the playing field. Can you touch a little bit on your perception of admissions consultants and how you guys think of them at Goizueta?
Yeah, I don't think that we certainly don't have any disparaging feelings about consultants. I think it's interesting and really an individual choice on what kind of support you feel like you need in going through this process. There does feel like there's a lot at stake. People want to get into a top program. They want to find a good fit. They're also managing a busy career where maybe they have a lot of hours they need to devote to that career still while they're going through this process. There's essays, there's recommenders to consider, there's interviews to prep for. So it feels like there's a lot riding on that. And I certainly don't fault anyone for looking to find a coach, which is kind of what a consultant is, to help through that process. Listen, I have a coach that I meet at the gym. I've had a nutrition coach. If you're trying to do something you don't know a lot about, you find someone to help you with that. And so for folks to find people who have expertise and leverage them during the process, I think is really appropriate. I do think that there are also a lot of free materials and free advice available on different websites. Sam, I know you have some things posted that anyone can have access to. We provide a lot of support through our admissions team as well. So I think it's very much an individual choice. Some people will want to have kind of a one-on-one coaching experience through this. Some people won't feel like they need that. We don't look at anyone's application considering where did you get or not get support. And so there are consultants, other students find value in groups like Forte or the consortium. Very similar model, really. It's finding a coach. They don't have any kind of advantage in the admission process. We look at their application the same way we would look at someone who's worked with a consultant as someone who hasn't had any of that. So I think it's just up to the individual to decide what's going to make them feel confident through this whole process.
I love it. Okay. And so one of the reasons people reach out for help, consultants or Forte, like you said, is that they feel like they have something in their application that they feel might be a red flag. And for example, I worked with a client last year who had a drunken disorderly record from a party during their undergrad. And they were very worried about how that might affect their application chances. I understand business schools look at an applicant holistically, but are there any red flags that you think, in your experience, would absolutely get an applicant dinged?
I mean, I think there are some red flags that would get someone disqualified from being offered admission. There are some felony convictions and things that we just can't overlook. And I was taught a long time ago that my job as the director or dean of admissions is to be fairly risk averse. I have a responsibility to the school, to the students who are currently here, to the community, to not to add anyone to the community who I think may be a threat in some way. And so, yeah, there are some behaviors or things in your history that are going to make it so that we can't offer you admission. The case that you brought up, I've read applications where somebody in college has a DUI or had a drunken disorderly or, got busted at a party before they were of age. That happens. And I think how a candidate addresses that in their application is really important. We want to see that was a learning experience, that you have changed because of that. And I've seen candidates who manage that well. They address it, they are truthful about it, and they've been admitted to schools. And I think that goes for, it doesn't have to be anything that dramatic. It can be a low undergrad GPA or a gap in your work experience. If you are honest about those things, that's your best shot at overcoming them and being offered admission.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you. I think a lot of people are going to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief when they hear that. Okay, a question then a little bit later on in the application process, after the applicant's done the GMAT and maybe their essays, is they're going to be asked to get a letter of recommendation. Now, Goizueta asks slightly different questions to recommenders than other schools. For example, you guys don't use the common letter of rec format for the letters of recommendation. Could you touch on perhaps why that is and what your thought process is behind that?
Yeah, we do vary a little bit. We do accept the common rec. If someone is using that, we will accept it. I think we just look for ways for the recommender, based on our experiences, to be able to provide the most comprehensive story about the candidate. From a letter of recommendation, we're really looking to get just a third-party viewpoint on your work experience and ways that you've demonstrated leadership or had an impact in an organization. And I think we've tailored those questions just based on experience to really fit what we're trying to get out of those recommendations.
Okay, good stuff. And then the next stage in the process, assuming all the essays and letters of rec, everything goes to plan, is the interviews. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about, both of you, a little bit about the interview stage of the process. So I think the first question is, when candidates receive their interview offer, they're often sort of excited, but also nervous. And there's a cocktail of emotions that come up there. I think the first question then is, Melissa, what proportion of applicants who receive an interview offer from Goizueta typically receive admit offers?
Gosh, it varies a lot from year to year. Last year, we were, like many schools, our application volume was a little depressed based on economic conditions. And so that percentage probably varied last year. So I don't have a specific number that I can quote today. An interview is a good indicator that we have seen enough in your application that we think you will be a good fit for Goizueta. And I don't want to say admission hangs on an interview, because it definitely doesn't. It's kind of a parallel process, and several people are looking at your application. Someone is interviewing, but then they're completing an interview report that goes into your file, and it's considered with all the rest of the materials. But we're pretty good at interviewing the folks that we think will end up being admitted.
Thanks a lot. And Aakash, could you maybe touch on your interview process and how you felt it? Because you were somewhat of a COVID applicant, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's correct. I think in the past, it was a good opportunity for people to go and check out the campus, which was obviously a little bit of a different experience. But overall, I think the interview went well. If I recall, I don't remember if there was a phrase for it, but there was a period where you can sign up for an early interview. And so I knocked out my interview in August, I think even before my application was still in progress. But I obviously knew my story at that point. But overall, I think it was an enjoyable experience. I remember who I spoke to, which is really important, because I can't say the same for other programs. And I remember when I received the admission notification, it was a phone call from the same person that interviewed me, which was a really nice touch. And then to top it off, I got a little box shipped to me the next day after the phone call with a little care package. And it was just overall a really great experience from interview all the way through getting admitted.
Sam, can I just quickly touch on something? We had emphasized in-person interviews as a great opportunity for people to come to campus and see a little bit of the community prior to COVID. During COVID, obviously, we switched to 100% virtual interviews. And I think what we learned during that period was that a virtual interview was convenient for our candidates a lot of the time, and also didn't take away our ability to do the evaluation we needed to do. So this year, we, and I think many other schools, are offering a choice for candidates between a virtual or an in-person interview. And I can see that that could create even more anxiety. So now I am excited that I got asked to interview. I'm also nervous. And now I don't know if my choice matters. How is that going to impact my experience or my application? And I want to assure folks that the virtual choice is very legitimate. It's not going to impact how your application is evaluated. And we're really continuing to offer it because we have learned that we can do the same kind of evaluation. It is convenient for people who can't travel to Atlanta, but we are offering the opportunity to come to campus to do your interview and sit in on a class or take a tour if you would prefer that. So please don't worry about the choice between virtual or on campus or in person. Make the choice that makes sense for you and your schedule, and that will be fine.
That's, I'm sure, again, very, very reassuring for some people, particularly candidates that might need to travel from abroad, and there's visa issues and all sorts. Fantastic. So one of the comments that I often get from applicants when I ask them, so how did your interview go? Sometimes, occasionally, they feel, they're a little bit downhearted, and they feel a little bit like their interview didn't go very well. Perhaps they felt like the questions were unfair, a little bit perhaps more difficult than they were expecting. Maybe the attitude of the interviewer was a little bit negative, which sometimes happens with, for example, alumni interviews. Can you talk about how you mitigate this? And then, Aakash, I'd like to ask you as well, how you think your consulting client-facing work helped you manage your interview process.
Sure. So at Goizueta, we use admissions staff people to do our interviews. And so we've kind of taken out that alumni factor from our interview process. And we really we do a lot of training with the folks who do the interviews about the questions to ask, and really see it as an opportunity, not only to learn about the candidate, but also to help the candidate learn about Goizueta. So we go into those interviews wanting to have a conversation, wanting to make it a relaxed experience, and just offer the opportunity for the candidate to tell their story. We really try to focus the candidate on things like their career progression, why Goizueta, again, trying to make sure that we get that good fit for this intimate learning environment, for this community, and what their career goals are after Goizueta. It's a great opportunity to talk about things that maybe you couldn't fit neatly into your application, and just bring more dimension to your story as a candidate.
Thanks a lot. So, Aakash, as a consultant who speaks to clients and internal stakeholders all the time, and especially during COVID, a lot of it was on Zoom. And then you had a Zoom interview. How do you feel your interview went? And do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the interview overall went well. There are some things that you may have to figure out. I think it's really important making eye contact, because when you're on Zoom, I fell into the habit of looking at the screen, but you want to be talking to the person. And in consulting, when we moved from 4 days a week on site in front of clients, and then we were virtual, we were on camera. And so I think that was something that helped, is that I felt comfortable looking into a camera or positioning it in a way that just made it feel more natural. I would also add, I think your question, Sam, was how was my experience as a consultant helpful? I would say as a consultant, when you're first meeting a client, you're being, for lack of a better word, judged or evaluated based on what you're saying. And so just being comfortable with that situation, and not feeling like if your previous response didn't hit the mark and you realized it in that moment, that's fine. You move on to the next question. And I think it just helps just to remember that the person on the other side of that camera or the table, wants you just as much as you want them. And at the end of the day, you're both people just talking to each other.
Yeah, it's lovely advice. Thank you very much. my questions, I have got great answers from both of you. Thank you very, very much. Melissa, could I ask you perhaps to finish up with, if somebody has watched this interview and thought they really like what they hear and they'd like to learn more about Goizueta, where would you suggest they head?
Yeah, sure. So I think our website is a great place to start. You can find links there on all of our upcoming admissions events. We are offering virtual and in-person events. We'd love to see people here on campus so that they can get an in-person feel for the community. But we offer a lot of different virtual engagements to kind of get a sense of who we are if you aren't able to travel here. We have our full admissions team is ready to meet with prospective candidates to help you with your application and to talk through our portfolio of programs. We're one of the few schools who have both a 2-year and a 1-year MBA option. Aakash is in the 1-year MBA right now, but we do have a traditional 2-year program as well. And if you're wondering which of those will be right for you, we're happy to talk you through that process as well.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, thank you very much for your time, Aakash and Melissa. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. And good, Aakash, best of luck with the rest of your program. And Melissa, I look forward to catching up with you at a recruitment event very soon.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Sam.
Cheers.